reflection. Today we're doing an open discussion, Q&A, on Catholic topics, and we'll just wait until people come in. I had a few things in my mind to get myself started today. Let's see here. Probably post I'm going live a few different places so people know. Because why not? Let's see. Where to say what? I could say something there. There. Hey Square, welcome in. How you doing today? Anything on your mind? I don't remember if it was you or somebody else I was talking with the other day. I had to get going and I had an unanswered question. I don't remember what it was. Doing good? Excellent. I'm doing better now that I'm stepping out of my isolation and talking to people. Yeah, so I've had a few Facebook discussions lately, and I have to say that I'm not sure if I'm enjoying dialoguing with people as much. Hey, thank you so much for the subscription. My notifications are on, so how's it going, Eel? But in the midst of these conversations, I'm realizing either A, some people, I don't know, Eel said recently that maybe the internet was a bad idea, kind of giving like open expression to everybody, and it's like maybe that's not a good idea. Hey, I just heard something. Did it pop up? Display window. It should show up. Let me see if I can. Rerun the notification. I don't know how. Here, let me test. Let me go to Streamlabs here and log in, so I can make sure everything's up and ready. But anyways, I found some people who think very odd things, and I mean, okay, I'm hearing, but I'm not seeing the notification. So, why would it be the case that I'm hearing it? I guess it's fine for now. It's not that big of a deal, I guess. Anyways, yeah, I would have these dialogues with people, and as soon as I get a response, I immediately question what I'm doing. Like, why am I spending time doing this? Because for whatever reason, I know that I'm educated. I know that I'm intelligent. I know I'm not the wisest person. But I think the best way to say it, it's hard for me to find kindred spirits with people. And I've ran into a few different things that I find to be interesting. But usually when I want to engage somebody, either A, they don't want to engage back because they're busy or something like that. I one time was talking to this one Catholic because he had made some comment about Honorius, and I just asked a simple clarifying question as to what he meant by a certain term that he used, and he said, I wrote about this on my Patreon. You could become a subscriber and you could read it there. And I'm like, well, it's a simple question. This is social media. It's kind of like the public square kind of thing. And you're placing it behind a paywall. As if somehow that's going to incentivize me to give you money, right? And he made some argument about, what about the books that are on my shelf? Maybe I bought those books. I don't buy a lot of books, especially at full price. If somebody gives me a book, I'm much more inclined to read it. Or I could find PDF versions. But I guess I'm less interested in opinion books. I'm more interested in like primary sources, just reading them myself, not really looking at the interpretations or explanations of others and things. And a lot of those sources can be found for free on the internet. All kinds of free blogs and things like that. I've been running a free blog for about 8 years. Obviously, my YouTube channel, it's not monetized. I've put hundreds of videos worth of content over the past 8 to 10 years, and I'm not looking for anything. So it's not a mentality that I have to engage in dialogue with people on Facebook just so that they would get interested enough to ask me questions, just so that I can turn around and say, oh, give me money. It's not a thing that I do, I guess. So a person make a claim that God was a human being and he went to Harvard and that he died about 10 years ago. And that this person who claimed to be God told this other person that they were their Messiah. And unfortunately, this person actually believes this and has also convinced other people that they are a Messiah. So it's very odd, humorous really. Can't do much about it. Now, I shut down conversations like that pretty quick. It's not really worth engaging other than to merely ask them a series of questions to get them thinking about their own position. Usually at that point, they are the ones who disengage. I'm not willing to suffer long for it. But I do and have engaged others in conversation. Tomorrow, we'll be doing a live interview with Will. He was on here before. He was with the Church of the Nazarene for many, many years. and like myself, became Catholic, and we interviewed him live on here, and he explained a little bit about how he was attracted to the Catholic liturgy and everything else. And I had decided, now that's been like over a year or so, that I was going to invite him back on and see what kinds of things that he's been learning about Catholicism since he's become Catholic. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into that a little bit. Probably only an hour discussion. So if anybody misses it live, they can just see it on YouTube and enjoy the content that way. But if you happen to catch it live and you have a question for Will, based on the discussion, by all means, feel free. Let me see. We also have another interview discussion lined, and that's gonna be Thursday, so 2 days from now. I think his name is Pedro Gabriel. I'm probably saying that wrong here. Let me. He is a Catholic author. Yeah, Pedro Gabriel. He's a Catholic author. He's a defender of Pope Francis, Catholic. And so we'll be able to enjoy having him on here on Thursday. So we're going to have 3 days in a row where we have a stream. We got today, we got tomorrow with Will, and then we have Pedro the following day. So I got some discussions lined up, which is pretty cool. I've been kind of putting some feelers out there to see what people would be willing to kind of sit down and dialogue with me in real time. I usually get turned down. I think I'm trying to build a platform. Not really doing that. I mean, I've got close to 300 videos over 10 years, and I got less than 500 subscribers. This channel's not going anywhere. That's not the point. It's just to make content available and free. So, and I enjoyed the dialogues, and I think other people enjoy watching me dialogue with other people too. The content is can be very stimulating, but it can be very difficult to get people. Normally, people of high caliber have a tendency to be popular, so they're not going on other channels unless they're like 500k subscribers and stuff like that, you know. It's like the Matt Frads and the Lila Roses, you know, who can get Scott Hahn to sit down with them, which would be fun. I'm not sure what I would discuss with him. You know, he has shared his own story so many times, and I really wouldn't know what to add, like what we would even talk about, I suppose. Now, if he came out with a new book and I thought it was interesting, then maybe that could be a topic, but he's definitely not coming on my channel talking to me, because they're normally doing it to get a platform so that they could expand their own reach. And if that's their mentality, then they don't have time to sit down and talk to me. I mean, I'm a nobody. I'm just some guy who likes to interact and have fun dialogue. Yeah, so it's just a matter of finding people to who want to sit down. This is a very informal kind of like I haven't had any like formal debates. Here I have reviewed debates. Michael Knowles recently did a debate, him and a conservative pastor and two liberal pastors concerning LGBT issues in the Bible, and I thought that would be an interesting review to do. Usually I need content to be able to comment upon. But if anybody has a topic you want me to just monologue on for a while, just let me know. I'll sit here and talk at you. You know, I can give myself a topic. Rhode Island. It's neither a road nor an island. Let's discuss. No. I need something substantive. Definitely need something substantive. Hey, more places where I could post where I'm going live. Come and talk to me, people. You know you want to. You know you starved for affection. You need it. You love it. Okay. Let's see. Anything else fresh on the mind? Or any plans? Anything of interest? I was talking to somebody a couple days ago about the language of imputation in theology, and whether or not it would be appropriate to use the language of imputation in relation to Catholic theology. I think in their mind, because the term impute means to kind of declare, or it could be credited, but we'll focus on the aspect of declaration, to impute. If by impute it simply means God is making a declaration of some sort, then I suppose we could smuggle in the term if it's highly qualified. But I think the problem is the fact that you would have to highly qualify the term in order for one to divorce it from Reformation theology. An example of imputation, for example, would be in modern court language. Let's say a man's going through a divorce and there needs to be a settlement on child support, but he is unemployed, but he had a previous job where he made X amount of dollars. So based on the previous employment, the court could impute income to you. That is, treat you as if you have that income which you do not have, in order to require you to pay a certain amount of child support. In this case, this language of imputation is that it's kind of credited to your account, right? I'm being treated as if I have this active income, which I do not, right? But and so Protestants would try to say that Christ's active and passive righteousness is imputed to us. That is, it's treated as if it is our own, even though it isn't, right? That's the best parallel I can try to draw. So the declaration that I am just is, in fact, a legal fiction, just like I don't actually have the income that the court is imputing to me. All right. So I kind of thought maybe we should just avoid the language of imputation altogether, as opposed to say, oh, there's a Catholic sense in which we can use imputation, highly qualified, because God does make a declaration, but it's causative, right? God doesn't declare something to be that's not. When God said, let there be light, there was light. It's not like, hey, there's light, and there isn't. That's not what God's doing. So I made the argument that maybe we should just stick to the language of infused and just reflect the canon on justification from the Council of Trent. That makes a lot more sense to me. I know some people, for example, would say something like, well, there is a sense in which we could use the language of faith alone. I suppose you can. Obviously, faith can be alone. You know how some people say we're justified on faith alone, but faith is never alone. That's a theological problem, because faith is simply the adherence to God's revelation. The demons do that, right? It's not sufficient. If you can have faith that moves mountains, to use hyperbolic language, it would not really mean anything, because there isn't love. And therefore, that's why the Council of Trent speaks about love being that which perfectly unites us to God. Which is why somebody, for example, could sin against love, but still have faith, but they're still in mortal sin. Of course, so they end up being in the same position as a demon who believes and actually has an appropriate response, right? Actually has an appropriate response of shuddering. It's not sufficient. Simply to really believe and respond to God. It has to be that we're not looking at God as a slave to sin anymore. We're looking at God as a loving Father who the love of Christ compels us. Right? But anyways, it's as Galatians says, that what matters is faith working through love. So this is the fide caritate formata. It's faith informed by love. Okay? These are different theological virtues that can exist apart from one another, except for one can't love God if they don't have faith. You know. We must first believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seeks him. And without this faith, nobody can please God. Right? So earlier today and yesterday, I engaged somebody on Facebook concerning a new book that they have released. Naturally, I asked a few questions and got the kind of response that I was expecting. That is, buy my book. I invited the individual to sit down and have a conversation, which would be great. But he came up with this idea that both Protestants and Catholics kind of get salvation wrong, and he has the solution. That piqued my interest. I mean, not because I no longer believe, that somebody critiques Catholic theology, therefore, what? I still firmly believe the Catholic faith is the fullness of truth, of course, but when people make claims like that, I'm kind of curious what they're doing there. Like, how did they get there? Stuff like that. Because I've noticed there's different kinds of people out there. And entering into dialogue with them is always a good thing. So, hopefully, after tomorrow and the next day, we could get more people lined up to kind of sit down with me and have a dialogue. I think that would be fun. Yeah, remember we sat down with, I can't remember his name, but I went on his channel, right? I went on his channel, and I was interviewed on Catholic theology, and I thought that was a decent conversation. I think the only thing I didn't like about it is that there was an anti-Catholic in the chat, and they were kind of just going off with all this anti-Catholic rhetoric, and that was probably the only unpleasant thing about it. Sorry, there's a fruit fly here. Every time I have myself a pint, it wants to have a pint too. Naturally. But I told this individual that I don't have any issues with the language of Trent on justification at all. The soundtrack doesn't sound familiar. Here, it's somehow it jumped to the end of the video. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we're good. Since I started studying Catholicism, even after becoming Catholic, I have read the Council of Trent and Justification over and over and over again, because I wanted to make sure that I really grasp what the Catholic Church was saying about justification, because it is, for many Protestants, the idea of justification by faith alone is the doctrine upon which the Protestant Reformation stands or falls. So if one could deviate from that, then obviously it falls. But when people have raised questions about it, usually the biggest argument that somebody would give usually comes from Reformed theologians. They would probably have the biggest critique of it. The anti-Arminian folk aren't really open to the prevenient grace of God and free will interacting, in some way where in their minds they can't see it other than, well, you're doing a work. You know, like I went to the corner of the room and did 50 reps of a 25 pound weight with my bicep. You know, I did the thing. You know, so God can give me grace now. You know, okay, kind of mentality, which isn't at all the way that it is conceptualized. You know, and I think a lot of it really starts with what in their mind necessitates a kind of monergistic movement of God in drawing a person to himself, that he just infallibly does this. You know, the grace that he gives is just intrinsically efficacious. But even when something is intrinsically efficacious in Thomist theology, it always retains the freedom of the will. You know, so there's no real tension there between human free will and divine sovereignty, because God's grace is going to do what God's grace was given to do. But I think logically that they kind of have to appeal to some sort of monergistic perspective. And that's because of the way that they conceptualize original sin. You know, what is our spiritual state? Well, Reformed theology uses the language of total depravity. But the Catholic Church doesn't teach total depravity, right? In fact, the term itself needs to be highly qualified, because obviously nobody's the worst that they possibly could be. But that it has influenced every aspect of ourselves, the totality of our person. Being deprived of sanctifying grace necessarily leads to various forms of depravity. But not to the point where that not even grace itself could work with you. Right? Grace has to, in Reformed theology, there's regeneration, right? Just so that you could have faith. Like, faith doesn't occur before regeneration, so God has to just do it. God has to flip the switch. Right? They use analogies, you know, like a corpse, you know, can't do anything, can't respond to God's grace, but God has to make the corpse alive, and now it can do things. Right? It could do good works and things like that. Now, there are some verses in the Old and New Testament that kind of sound like this. I'm not saying that the language comes from nowhere, but it's the same kind of thing where they will look at the suffering servant and they'll employ that language and be like, oh, look, God is inflicting him. Right? Jesus is being punished. So that's in their theology. So likewise, they'll use an analogy that Paul uses, that we are dead in our sins and things of that nature. Or that, you know, the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? Or, you know, the inclinations of their heart were evil all the time. You know, there's this language, you know. But I've known enough good-natured people, come on, you can have your fruit fly, enough good-natured people to know that grace is definitely operative in some folks. That they don't seem to be spiritually dead. You know, they have an openness to God, or they just seem to have a good nature about them. There's something of the goodness of God that exists in this individual. And so taking those verses in that way and trying to apply it to this person, be like, oh no, you're absolutely dead in your sin. You're a child of the devil. You deserve fire and hell. You know, there isn't any there isn't any distinctions that are being drawn. So grace definitely can be operative in people. And I think that analogy kind of creates a black and white. I mean, it is true, for example, that a person either has sanctifying grace or they do not. This is true. There is a kind of a black and white aspect to it. But just because a person doesn't have sanctifying grace, which is a habit of grace in the soul, doesn't mean that God doesn't give active grace. Right? Grace that moves us. And prevenient grace that basically prepares us. A preparatory measure. And leading us to Him. One of the teachings that is, I don't want to say unique to John Wesley in his Arminianism, but he proposed that he wanted to maintain the Protestant principle of total depravity. He wanted to maintain that same language, right? But he then says, but what grace does is it brings a measure of salvation to all men, that by this prevenient grace, the will is freed to respond to divine movements. Fascinating idea. So, as a former Wesleyan, well, I could just get rid of all of that mess. Say, well, I don't have to say, well, you know, by law, and I suppose it's not a huge mess, but the idea is it's not even just partial depravity, it's, you know, our nature is not completely destroyed. Wesley made distinctions. He would say that the moral image in man is lost, is totally lost. But he'll say the political image, for example, has only been marred. So there's aspects of the image of God that are marred, but morally speaking, in that sense, it is lost. Which sounds a lot more Catholic. So it's almost like, and some have said this, that Wesley attempted to make some kind of synthesis with Protestant principles with Catholic substance. But often it ends up creating this situation, like in his mind, that, oh yeah, we're totally depraved, But we're not left that way. So even when we're born, you know, God's grace is doing something. So it's kind of like a layered theological construct. So his initial point is a mere construct. It doesn't actually exist in reality. I suppose I have no use for that in this point in soteriology. That was him trying to harmonize something. But how about we just get rid of the Protestant principle and just have the Catholic substance? Bam. Easy. We don't have any of these legal fictions. You know, we don't have these mere intellectual constructs. We can just have our ideas. All right, so this is open discussion, Q&A, ask me anything. I will respond with a Catholic perspective. Any topics, thoughts, ideas, anything that anybody would like to explore and talk about, or just give me fuel for the fire for my ramblings. I'd be more than happy to engage. Otherwise, I could probably go to X, see if I can find some stuff. Why are you Catholic? Let's see what kind of responses we get. Somebody says, I wrestle with this because I received infant baptism into a very, very large Catholic family. They all lived a vastly superior moral life. I didn't. But somehow I'm the only Catholic left among us, praying for those who have fallen away. Oh, that's an interesting experience that one had. I guess it really depends what is meant by a vastly superior moral life. And it kind of makes me wonder why correct theology is not kind of worked into this, because normally the way that we worship is the way we believe, it's the way that we live. Is that the lex Aurendi, lex clarendi? Because if you think about it, it's a righteous thing to do. To think rightly about God. I mean, yeah, sure, maybe you didn't look at pornography today. That's good. But you see God as some tyrant in the sky. Theology matters. Let's see. Do we have any other good ones here? So somebody said that they were Catholic because they're not a godless heathen. That's funny. X doesn't have the laugh emoji. Let's see. Peace and blessings upon you. Well, thank you so much. Anything on your mind today? Any topic you want me to ramble about? Heck, I just need a topic. You don't. Yeah, I mean, you could just drop a line and then just run. I'm digging for stuff. This person said, I became Catholic because I read the Bible and came to the conclusion that I must be taught by someone with the authority to do so. Then I read Matthew 16 and it clicked. To be clear, I used to go to a Nazarene church. Ecclesial community as well. And let's see. Yeah, me too. A week or two ago, I had a Buddhist on for, I don't know, hour and a half. And I think maybe it was only an hour. And my main goal was, you're okay. Just mostly to listen. And while I'm listening, find like these points of connection. He did say that he was open to coming back and sharing some more in the future. So I look forward to that. I haven't floated any dates or topics or anything, but that initial connection I think was very good. I do think that maybe there are some divergences in the concept of suffering that wasn't necessarily highlighted, though he did say that Zen Buddhism speaks of thought itself as being suffering, and that of course would be contrary to Catholic teaching, but that there is something important going on with suffering, and that there are better perspectives to have concerning it than wallowing and self-pity and so on and so forth. Yeah, it doesn't appeal to me because it leaves a lot of things unanswered. Like my theology is just so rich and comprehensive that kind of openness, on thoughts and ideas wouldn't be. It wouldn't appeal to me because I'm always trying to piece things together, and I think that's important. And maybe some people kind of like that openness. But yeah, I'm always up for dialogues and talking to folk. I've yet to have anybody that I have dialogued with on the channel who kind of took it as like an informal debate kind of thing. It's always been just listening to each other, which is fine. Things I think really start that way. I see people who are completely disconnected get into a debate with each other on Facebook, for instance, and there hasn't even been any personal connection. I don't mind like asking a question or sharing a thought here and there, but ultimately I'll try to draw them to like on here or have, it doesn't even have to be live. It could just be, a live conversation. The art of conversation has been lost. People don't really connect and really listen to each other. And by listen, I mean to figure out where they're coming from, not because their conclusions about all of it are decent or even right. It's just treating people like people instead of treating them as the face of the opposition. So the person doesn't exist. You can just kind of like a thin, unrevealed person, and basically they're just a talking head, and you're just interacting with concepts merely. Yeah, you don't know anything about the person. There's nothing to be. And I suppose, in a way, debate's kind of like that. But my favorite part of a debate is the cross-examination. Because it's the only time in the debate when the debaters actually dialogue and ask questions of one another. I think that portion of the debate should be much longer and regulated. I'm fine with opening statements. I don't really need a closing statement. I really don't. The opening statement kind of gives me an idea. The rebuttals, that's the beginning of interacting with content, but the cross-examination, they're too short. So those periods in the debate are so short. Sometimes it's like 5 minutes. You get 5 minutes to cross-examine. You get 5 minutes to cross-examine. And it's barely enough time. I mean, I would be happier just listening to a full discussion. Because through that discussion, you're going to get their opening statement. You're going to get their closing statement. You're going to get their rebuttals. But what really is going to flesh it out in real time is the two debaters connecting, where they truly understand the other's position enough to ask intelligent questions. Though maybe that's not a debate. Maybe that's more just a discussion. So, yes, debates aren't really that fruitful. It's true that they might not be. I watched a debate once. It was an hour and a half. And there was no cross-examination. They merely just took turns making assertions that were contradictory to each other. And that's it. That's all that it was. There was no dialogue between the two individuals. It was pretty much worthless to me. Everyone goes out thinking they got the best out of the other person. You're right. That's right. James White destroys Joe Heschmeyer. And the other person's like, Joe Heschmeyer completely refutes and demolishes James White. Just depending on if they heard what they wanted to hear. I would think that if a person left the Catholic Church to join James White and friends, or one of them became Catholic, would be very far in between. Maybe there's somebody out there who was influenced by the debate and some wonderful way that it changed the way that they looked at the world and themselves. Muslim? Okay, very good. Yeah. I too worship the God of Abraham, though agreeably we understand such God a little bit differently. But the God of Abraham that created heaven and earth, who will judge all things. Yep, it's good stuff. In fact, what was it? What's the quote here? Let me pull up this quote here. Yes, yeah. Well, obviously the person of Jesus for sure. How can God have a son? Right? And the nature of God. It's my understanding, do Muslims have more of a voluntarist view of God? I don't know if that's like a universal Muslim teaching. I'm not sure. Okay, I found the quote. Second Vatican Council, Lumen Gentium 16, says, but the plan of salvation also includes, this is from Vatican II, this is an ecumenical council in the Catholic Church. The plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator, in the first place among whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge on the last day. There's a lot more to be said. Nostra Aetate, the Second Vatican Council, also says quite a bit of stuff. Let's see. I'll get to your question in a minute. I was just looking at this. The Church has high regard for Muslims. They worship God, who is one, living and subsistent, merciful and almighty, the creator of heaven and earth. Looks like that actually comes from Gregory the Seventh, who has spoken to men. Yeah, there's, let me see. They strive to submit themselves without reserve to the hidden decrees of God, just as Abraham submitted himself to God's plan, to whose faith Muslims eagerly link their own. Although not acknowledging him as God, they venerate Jesus as a prophet. His Virgin Mother they also honor, and even at times devoutly invoke. I'm not sure what that means. Further, they await the day of judgment and the reward of God following the resurrection of the dead. For this reason, they highly esteem an upright life and worship God, especially by way of prayer, almsgiving, and fasting. Oh yes, I'm sorry. I was still reading what the Church has to say about Islam. My apologies. You also cannot. You can't be Muslim without accepting and loving Jesus as a prophet of God. Okay, that makes sense. That's what the Pope said. Or this may still be Nostra Aetate from the Second Vatican Council. I didn't know it said so much stuff about Islam. Okay, so how to describe voluntarism? Yeah, I can find more quotes if you're interested. Oh yeah, absolutely. I definitely follow the church and its wisdom to recognize absolutely everything that is true within Islam, and those words kind of encapsulate that kind of stuff. Okay, so voluntarism is the idea that within the nature of God, the will is supreme. That God can will absolutely anything. As opposed to say that the will is in acts out of and in accordance with the divine intellect or the divine logos kind of idea that I would say he can will anything that's within his nature. Okay, that doesn't sound that doesn't sound voluntarist. I don't remember where I thought I heard that. I think maybe I was thinking about something in Protestant theology, for example. Be like, hey, your God isn't all powerful. He can't will himself to not exist anymore. Or they'll say, oh yeah, he can, but he just never will. Like, no, he can't will contradictions, right? Like God can't create a square circle, right? There's just an incoherence there. I'm trying to remember. I was doing some reading on the argument from contingency concerning the existence of God, and it wasn't Averroes. It was if I can pronounce the name right, Avicenna, Ibsina, Ibn. Yeah, and I was reading some of his contributions to the argument on contingency. Very brilliant Islamic philosopher. So I appreciate those kinds of contributions because I've spent some time with Aristotle and Aquinas, and I just appreciate the brilliance and defense for the existence of one God, who is subsistent and the necessary being, the uncaused cause of all causation. Yeah, necessary existence. Yeah. How about the I'm gonna guess that how about divine simplicity? I'm gonna guess Islam holds to divine simplicity. That God, like his existence is identical to his essence, and that the divine intellect is identical to his will, and so on and so forth. That's simplistic, but the idea of divine simplicity. Okay. Well, certainly in the sense that God is not a trinity in Islamic theology. Even though there's actual argumentation for how God can, and that makes me wonder. Is there a lot of dialogue about that kind of stuff? Just what some of the distinctions are between a kind of Unitarian and a Trinitarian conception. So simplicity with attributions. Okay, so let's say an attribute of God is justice. Another attribute is love. Would we say that in God, his love is justice and his justice is love? That in God, these aren't kind of composite, separate, distinct things, but they exist as a single thing within God, right? because he's obviously not composed of parts. You know, there aren't like these internal parts of himself, so to speak. There's a kind of like a single divine essence. So even within his attributes, would you say that there are that they're identical? I'm not sure. I haven't. I know that's how it's conceptualized in Catholic theology, but simplicity with attributions. If by attribution you're not referring to attributes, maybe you're referring to certain acts being attributed to certain characteristics within himself. Like, this is a justice thing that God did, or this is a loving thing that God did. There's in his mercy outweighs his wrath. Okay, very good. That is an interesting idea. So, generally, with divine simplicity, we're basically saying that God's justice and mercy are identical. Now, what's interesting, though, is that when we think about it, we're looking at justice. Justice is to give to a person their due, whether reward or punishment, right? It's just giving them their due. But mercy says God is going to reward more than one is due, and he's going to punish less than what one is due, right? So his mercy then really defines how justice ends up functioning, right? He's most loving before he created anything. So maybe he isn't always exuding that attribute, but it won't change that he is most loving. Most loving. This is an interesting idea. Okay, so so if God is the only eternally existing thing, I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying the existent being. Okay, I'll put it that way. That's better. It's more respectful. That means at one time, only God existed. Nothing else existed. Everything that's contingent has not been brought into existence. Because contingent things don't have existence within itself. It has existence given to them by something else that's already existing. So here is God. Now we ask the question: if God is most loving, right? And this is kind of a defining characteristic that that best describes God. Like, God is love, for example, kind of language. How do we understand that God is love in first loving himself with no expression of love? Now, I don't have any problem with not necessarily having an expression of love outside of himself, because it's not necessary for God. It's not necessary that God's a creator, right? So it doesn't. So God isn't kind of like either required to create, and he's not under any kind of compulsion to have to create something so that he has something to love that is external to himself. But in loving himself through his understanding of himself, right? Because he's all good and deserving of all love. So he certainly gives this to himself first and foremost, right? And to us, in as much as we participate in being, in goodness, and so on and so forth. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to really think about what that existence is like. Now, just for a moment, because I've been talking about Islamic theology, which I don't know a lot about, but I think there's a lot of connections. Within the Christian mindset, for those who also want to ponder this same kind of question of God from eternity past, loving himself and so on and so forth, that is reflecting on himself, knowing himself, and loving himself. This, in Christian theology, is conceptualized as first and foremost as the intellective procession. Okay, this is how, I'm not sure if you knew any of this, about what Catholics think, right? That there's this eternal reflection of God upon himself, right? So the divine intellect fully grasps and knows itself. And to use an analogy, this image of this knowledge of himself is, of course, himself. So once again, this is an analogy. If I, for example, were to contemplate myself in my mind, there would be an image of me in my mind that is perfectly me. But it's not me, right? And so in Christian theology, what they attempt to do is that in the divine intellect, there's this grasp or understanding of divinity. So in this case, it's the Father fully grasps and understands himself, and this is what is called the eternal process, the intellective procession of the Son, that the image of God within his own mind is also God, but there's also some sort of distinction that exists, and this is because God, unlike my mind that's finite and limited, grasping an image of myself within myself doesn't constitute a kind of equal person per se. So as the Father contemplates himself, this intellection is what constitutes the sameness of divine essence, but a distinction that between the grasp of the understanding of oneself from oneself itself. It's the same, but it's different. So there's a oneness, there's a sameness, but there's also this distinction of some sort. This distinction is what Christians refer to as the Son. That is why, like in John's Gospel, he is referred to as the Logos, which is the divine reason, right? It's because of this intellective procession within God himself. He knows himself. And this thing that he knows from object to subject is not only himself, but also a reflection or the knowledge of what that is. And that's what Christians are saying is the Son, for instance. It is fascinating. I plan on laying it all out in my upcoming book on philosophy and Catholic theology. But my ramblings are probably a dim comparison to what could be said about it, in terms of how do we understand the actions or the characteristics of God in loving himself, and what it means for love to be. I also want to spend time kind of helping people avoid the language of person. Because when people, for instance, say that there are 3 persons in the Trinity, they're thinking, oh, there's 3 centers of consciousness, there's 3 distinct wills, there's 3 distinct intellects, they're kind of projecting a kind of anthropomorphic conception of person, for instance. And that's all wrong. That's completely wrong. People get all that wrong. But anyways, I'm rambling on my side. But back to your side. It's not simplicity exactly, from what I understand. Doesn't fit the definition. I actually find, I was reading an article recently about divine simplicity, and the argument was that if we argue for divine simplicity, then it creates what is called modal collapse. And apparently there's a lot of articles on modal collapse where they're making the argument that one can't maintain divine simplicity. They just can't do it. And they're making an appeal to how such a God would have to exist in all possible worlds, but he couldn't. I don't know. I guess it's not worth me bringing it up if I can't articulate it well. The ideas are too fresh. But it is interesting to explore those things which have been divinely revealed by God about himself, and watch people struggle to grasp it. Yeah, first things first. Although, you know what's interesting? You just remind me of something, and you can continue typing, but I have a friend who believes that we have a soul. Okay? Not necessarily in the Platonist sense, but that there is some immaterial aspect to ourselves. And I remember this person was agnostic about God, and what I did was I used something that they affirmed, that they believed, and I showed how it was therefore logically necessary for God to exist based on something they already believed. And so I wasn't trying to build a foundation fresh and new. I had to really find out what they thought about certain subjects and make connections to it, right? Such as, the argument, well, you're talking about immateriality. Well, how are you grounding that in materialism, for instance? Are you saying that the immaterial comes from the material, for instance. And if somebody doesn't accept that, that there's a soul that's immaterial, you can help one reason to it that the soul is immaterial, and then you could reason to the fact that there's a immaterial source of the soul that's created immediately by God. Well, that's Catholic theology. I don't know. Do Muslims believe that we have like an immaterial soul? I've never looked into that. I wondered if that was the case, because the argument from contingency seems to I guess I'm thinking more of Aristotle and his argument that we can grasp universals which are immaterial, therefore there has to be a corresponding immateriality about ourselves in order to grasp those things. Otherwise, we would be just confined to the senses. We would be confined to particulars without being able to reason to the universal. Talk about metaphysical explanation or metaphysical abstraction. That level of intellective activity or intellection, as opposed to a kind of mere empirical abstraction where we merely recognize, hey, this particular is the same as that particular. It just doesn't seem to rise to the level of what our intellect is capable of grasping. But if we're really made in the image and likeness of God, I know that's more Christian language. I don't know what Islam thinks. That one of the ways in which we reflect the image of God is that we have an immaterial intellect that's not kind of like stationed in any organ of the body, for instance, which only deals with senses, empirical engagement, and particular instantiations of universals, but not yet rising to the metaphysical abstractions, something like that. But what was your thoughts on how you might help your atheist or agnostic friends, assuming that they're materialists, right? I know for me, for example, the idea of the existence of the soul has been very important to me to move beyond a kind of materialistic thinking. Aristotle helped with that, with the nature of the intellect, but it has to, like within materialism, they would have to affirm that our consciousness, our will, our intellect, everything is an epiphenomenon that's basically grounded in physical matter, right? Material composition of the brain, the physical structures within the brain, chemical reactions, electrical impulses. It can be very difficult to talk to somebody who has such a concept of consciousness that doesn't somehow reduce into some kind of determinism. It's the, hey, you made a choice 8 seconds before you were even conscious that you made such a choice. Kind of argumentation. Though I suppose, having a series of questions to see exactly how they reduce all of that and how they maintain free will, how they experience something as, in a way, like consciousness itself just seems to be, it's not, I don't want to say that the consciousness itself as a whole is immaterial. It's certainly grounded in the material. It most certainly is. My dog over there, you can't see the doggo. Do you see the dog sleeping? Shut up. Shut up. Okay, never mind. The dog has consciousness, like a material consciousness kind of thing. But there's no intellect, though. It's all instinct and confined to the senses and particulars and all of that. But I'm speaking less of consciousness, I guess. I'm speaking more of intellect. I think when it comes to the will and the intellect, those two things don't seem to be fully accounted for based on material alone. So we need a non-material explanation. Well, that would be immaterial. That would be fascinating. I'll be right back. I also wonder, though, sometimes underneath why some people are atheistic or agnostic, because they have some sort of, hey, look, the dog. Hi. Want to say hi? Apparently not. Like, I've had people, well, let me bring Christopher Hitchens up, for example. He was very anti-religion, and he thinks the world would be a better place if we didn't have any religion at all. No attempts to grasp ultimate reality and truth, and so on and so forth. He would often fill his speeches, lectures, and things, and debates with atrocities. They'll talk about the Inquisition and the Crusades and this and that, and the Catholic Church is bad. And I'm gonna guess that the people who do the same thing with Islam, in their mind, they're thinking radical Islamic terrorism. They're thinking 9/11. They're thinking fundamentalists who want to kill the infidel, you know, that kind of language. And I'm gonna guess that they may have some of this stuff like in the back of their mind that's saying, don't accept anything that they're saying about these other things, because hey, there's still this other stuff that have to be addressed. And I think in people's minds, there's so many things that are unaddressed in their mind that it leaves them closed to considering other aspects, such that there is a God. Right. I remember in Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, the movie with Tom Hanks, he was saying, oh, we don't know who was the cause of those atrocities. You know, it could have been Christians killing non-Christians. We don't know. You know, and it cut to this scene of people, like, putting spikes in their gut and lifting them up and stuff. And it's like, but there really is a distinction, isn't there, between what a religion teaches and what people do with it. To addressing the historical issues. What are the historical issues surrounding Christianity? Well, mainly they were persecuted for 300 years until the Edict of Milan at 313, where Christianity was legalized by Emperor Constantine. You know, some people will say that, well, Islam has a militant nature at its origin. That Muhammad came back and slaughtered people who were believing in other gods, and so on and so forth. Kind of forcing a monotheism on a polytheistic culture. I'm not sure if that's true, but my point is that if people have these ideas in their mind, whether they're right or they're wrong, can be a hindrance to them considering people. I know it's a big thing right now about stolen land and stuff in the United States. You know, we're on you know, we are living on the land of the indigenous people of such and such and so on and so forth. And here we have, like, Abraham being promised by God that he's going to occupy this land. Well, I mean, and then when those people actually did. They had to take it from other people. So they're like, oh no, I definitely don't want to follow the God of Abraham, a God who promised him land that he has to take from other people. You know, that's displacement, that's racism, that's yeah, there's a lot of accusations out there about stuff. And I'm gonna guess there is much historical right, because if I understand it correctly, Abraham had Isaac and Ishmael, right? Jews say that Isaac was the child of the promise in his lineage, so the Jews follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so on and so forth, the 12 patriarchs and all of that stuff. And obviously we have the story of them coming out of Egypt and into the promised land and all of that stuff. But whatever happened to Ishmael, right? He obviously became a people. They lived somewhere. Are they cousins or are they brothers as a result of this? I think I heard one Muslim say that Ishmael was the son of the promise, and that in the Old Testament it's actually talking about Ishmael. It's not talking about Isaac. I don't know if that's true, but that's one hears things. The covenant was with Isaac. Interesting. I guess sometimes I wonder if it's one of those situations where Ishmael was promised a great nation. Sorry, I was just thinking how like Ishmael was referred to as an ass of a man in the Old Testament, and I'm thinking to myself like, what does that mean? Now, do Muslims hold that the Old Testament is correct? So it is the idea that Isaac and their people broke the covenant, which they obviously did many times, which is why, like in the Old Testament, they were like dispersed and overtaken by the Babylonian, like the Babylonian captivity and all of that stuff. They kept breaking it, you know. So it is the idea then that the covenant shifted, where the children of Ishmael became part of a new covenant with God, like he shifted from the children of Isaac to the children of Ishmael. Is that how that's conceptualized, or is it not like that at all? Okay. So, what was it? Was it the Archangel Gabriel who appeared to Muhammad and basically reestablished a new people? This is what, 600 AD or something? Well, heck, that would have been long after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD and the rise of Christianity to prominence in the Roman Empire. First time in the cave of Hira. 610. Okay, I knew it was 600 something. I'm glad I have at least some sort of memory. Over 23 years. And that's where he had him write the Quran, right? All those, what are they called? Siras? So it was being composed over a period of 23 years, or that's the idea. Oh, okay. He recited them. What you doing, doggo? Well, we seem to be having a fun time with dialogue. Would you ever be interested in actually talking on stream, like coming on and you be like right here and you can help me better understand? I'm asking about the Old Testament to believe in what was revealed to Moses. What's PBUH? But we believe there are some truths in the Old Testament and some fabrications. Okay. No, that's not blunt. That's oh, okay. Moses, peace upon him. Okay, very good. Okay, so is something considered a fabrication if and only if it disagrees with something that's in the Quran, or are the things that are said to be fabrications due to some external source from that? Oh, okay. So for the most part, if there's something in Scripture that disagrees with the Quran, now, is there, you know what, maybe we should wait till actually, like, have a dialogue, and I'll ask you lots of questions, and we'll just have to set that up. Because I think that would be fun, so I can learn more about other Abrahamic religions. Oh no, not at all. I mean, you watched me talk to the Buddhist, right? And you're watching how I'm talking to you right now, right? That's pretty much what it's gonna be. I will ask questions, naturally, and you can ask questions, and we can just hear each other and find similarities and ask questions about anything. I think that would be fun. Not a debate, trust me. I'm more interested in just having a beer and chatting and thinking together. Yeah. You know me by now. I'm not a crazy person. Hey, Decent, welcome in. Welcome to the Catholic Q&A. Any thoughts on your mind today? Yeah, I try to be respectful. I think mainly because I'm convinced of a particular idea. And that is, I do not fault anybody for following what seems to be to them the most convincing thing that has been presented to their intellect thus far. Can't blame anybody for that. Because why would one's intellect be attracted to something less than the most convincing thing that they ever heard thus far? So I recognize the limitations that we as humans have, very subject to whether we're presented something or not. Now, what bothers me are people who become stagnant and they don't think, right? That they just at some point close their mind and they're done thinking. You know, I'm fine with thinking. Now, I'm not talking about a mind being so open that their brain falls out. I'm saying that, hey, maybe there is something out there that's even more convincing than what has been presented to them thus far. Well, how do you get that? Through dialogue, just having conversations. That's it. Right? Nobody has to necessarily change their minds or anything, but so yeah, I don't fault people for following the best ideas that they've been presented. But I think any reasoning person who's intellectually honest with themselves are willing to examine as much as they can. You know, I mean, why not? Not that they're going to be convinced by it, but maybe they could. Like, if you want to talk to your atheist and agnostic friends, there's got to be some way of getting past bias enough to be able to present ideas that their intellect could be like, oh wow, this is the new thing, right? This is the new best idea I've ever heard. Because I think, and I've seen people who have a very aggressive proselytism kind of mentality, and they're very forceful, and sometimes it comes off as demeaning, doesn't really respect the intellectual process. You know, it's like, you must believe this. It's like, hey, it has not yet convinced me. You know, and hey, I'm trying. But, I mean, how many good-natured people do you find who are actually, yeah, I'm genuinely trying. I'm listening to what you're saying. You know, now you could say, well, the best idea in my mind still kind of critiques that, you know. It's not all that convincing to me as of yet, you know. But I think the willingness to allow one's ideas to be tested against ideas that may be presented, I would definitely want that in case I'm wrong about something. If I'm wrong about something, you know, maybe it's a historical fact, maybe it's a philosophical argument, like whatever it may be, you know. If I never listen to it, I'll never know if it's better. You know, I don't want to be one of these people with dumb ideas, you know, and have this kind of being closed to things. Heck, for all I know, I already have the fullness of truth, you know. But hey, just in case, you know, I don't think that wrong ideas are going to be very attractive to me. You know, I've spent way too much time thinking about things, you know. Yeah, I could see that being a thing. You know, just kind of do a presentation, present what you think to somebody, and they may not be convinced by it. I certainly believe that the God of Abraham is a real thing, right? They may not be convinced of it yet. Now the thing is, like you said, they're not even theists yet. Let's see if we can get them to be theists. Is there a God? Is there a God that exists? And, well, the next question is has this God ever revealed himself anywhere? Is this just the deist God who started the world and just let things go about their business, and he's never revealed himself, he's never worked a miracle, he's never like actively engaged us at all, we're just classical theists, we're just convinced that there's a necessary being, but we haven't really moved into the idea of, okay, has he revealed himself? Did God really reveal himself through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad? Did he really reveal himself to Moses in the burning bush? Did he really become incarnate in the person of Jesus Christ? That's a whole new question. We got the God thing, but if he has revealed himself, when and where? How? And why does that convince me? Why are some people convinced that God became incarnate in Jesus Christ? Why are some people convinced that God merely worked through Moses, like Abraham and Moses and that stuff? Or that God additionally, or has in fact, revealed himself to Muhammad in a cave. The cave of Hira in 610 AD for over a period of 23 years, multiple times. That's a new question. And to be honest, I think it's probably easier to convince somebody that a God exists than it is to convince somebody that he has revealed himself. Because that a God exists usually is much more narrow, because if there's a God that exists beyond like people claiming that our planet was seeded by aliens or something like that, or that what we call God is just another contingent thing among contingent things, like aliens seeding our planet. If we philosophically go to the highest conception possible by the human intellect, we arrive at a necessary being. Yes, I would say that I think there are certain things that reason can't prove or demonstrate, but it's fitting, right? Because even in our theology, God doesn't create necessarily. Like he's not, God didn't have to create. He chose to create. He chose to share his love, right? All of it. So we were created out of love, I mean, ex nihilo, yes, we weren't from the divine essence kind of thing. We're not a chip off the old block in a Gnostic kind of way. But we were created out of love, as an overflow of God's love. He chose out of love to create us. So it seems fitting that a God who is, and that there are arguments for that God is relational. We can obviously add that there's volition within God. It doesn't have to be a contingent thing either. He could still be actus purus, pure actuality, and still will for something to exist that occurs at a particular point in time. it's a hard thing to talk about. But it's fitting that a God of love will reveal himself. Right? He will want to relate to us in some way. That he would send guidance. Now the real question is try to kind of pinpoint how that happens. Because a Muslim will say the Archangel Michael, right, appeared to Muhammad in a cave around 610 over a period of, 25 years? More for the 7 questions. Or was it the Archangel, not Archangel Michael, Gabriel. I think I said Gabriel, I don't know, anyways. Or did the Archangel Gabriel appear to a woman and say to her that Jesus was going to be of the Most High and the Holy Spirit would overshadow her? I suppose somebody could say both, but they understand Jesus differently as maybe some others would. Hence why he's seen as a prophet, which is fascinating. That's something I definitely would want to explore. Exactly what that means. Because I'm guessing that there are fabrications said of even the New Testament itself. And so-called biblical texts where it appears that Christ is making some sort of claim to divinity or something of that nature, how that kind of points and is interpreted to finally get at this point where Gabriel, who once appeared to Mary, is now appearing to Muhammad and so on and so forth. We don't want to explore all that right now. We want to make sure that we actually have content for a video that we discuss things. But back to my point, though, is when and where and how. We can argue that it's very fitting for God to give guidance all we want, but how do we really convince somebody that, oh, it was at this moment? Because here's the thing. The intellectual landscape is flooded with claims. Heck, I ran into this person on Facebook who claimed that God was a person who owned their own business and graduated from Harvard, who died in 2014, and that this God, told her that she was his Messiah. And not only does she continue to believe this, she convinces other people. And there are people convinced of this. It's scary. It really is. So there has to be some way of really distilling all of these claims down to something definitive. You know? And I think that's the trick. I talked to this one classical theist, for example. He's not a Jew, not a Muslim, not a Christian. He refers to himself as a classical theist. And he doesn't believe that God has revealed himself in any specific occasion. He believes that God has equipped us with our intellect to be able to perceive his existence. But basically the arguments of Aristotle will get you to the unmoved mover. You know, so Aristotelian philosophy can arrive at God. You know, but that's as far as he goes. He says that's pretty much what God gives to us. There isn't like this special revelation that's given at any point in time. And nothing I said could convince him that God ever did. There wasn't a single argument I could make. Because to him, it was always somebody making a claim that God did. Because God has never revealed himself to him specifically. So, unless he does, which he doesn't believe that he will, or if he did, it certainly wouldn't be binding on anybody else as a public revelation that everybody's supposed to hold to. And in fact, he argued that it was too narrow. It wouldn't be a thing that God would do. Because his whatever he gave to us in our nature, or if he revealed anything, it would have to be for everybody. Not speaking privately in a cave or in some, desert or something like that, where this man is merely making this claim that he's going to do this thing, and so on and so forth. How to get a person from here to here. It just seems like a bit too much for them, I should say. Some people won't be convinced of anything. Oh, sure. If you showed a ladder going to heaven, people would say you have been hypnotized, or this is magic. I know, right? As far as I know, Jesus never claimed he was the Son of God himself, right? I think he uses the language Son of God. The Son of Man is definitely used. But he was even asked by the Jews, are you the Son of God? Or in his temptations, if you are the Son of God, right? Tell these stones to become bread. If you are the Son of God, right? So it's definitely something that's in the New Testament. Son of God and Son of Man, this language is used. Son of Man usually refers back to Daniel and the one coming in the clouds, which is what was claimed to be blasphemy in the face of the Sanhedrin. Right, so you do believe in the New Testament. There is quite a bit, especially the Gospel of John. I do like John. I like the Gospel of John and 1 John. Right, I like the Johannine writings. If there was a gospel that I were to read, if you say I could only read one of the gospels, I would say I'd probably read John. It is what some would refer to as the most theologically developed. Whatever. The other obvious part is he could easily have said, no, I didn't say that, and I did it there. That could have saved him a lot of trouble, right? He got in a lot of trouble for stuff like that. John is a faster runner. It's proof. John made it very plain that he got to the empty tomb before Peter did, but he didn't enter. Peter was the one that entered. Yeah. I was talking to a Mormon once, and he was quoting the I said you're a gods, and the way that they were interpreting the passage is that that basically we all get to become God, our own gods, and so on and so forth. And I found that to be quite interesting. The explanation for it, I think, enters into a question of hierarchy. For example, there's a passage in the Old Testament where it says he created us a little lower than the angels. That's one translation. Another one says that Another translation is that he created us a little less than God. And this idea of hierarchy, right? That in relation to nature, we certainly are gods. Like this dog over here, I am its freaking master. I'm its Lord. I'm its God. I care for it. I feed it. You know, it has to listen to my commands. You know, we are highly important. So I think if you have the actual reference, I'll read it live. But that's been my understanding of what he's getting at, if I remember correctly. I could be misremembering, but let's see where I'm at here. I don't know where this verse is for Jesus. Was quoting Psalms. He was. Okay, here, let me find it then. Ye shall be gods. Some comment in the gospel. So that means two things. Jesus was facing accusations of blasphemy. Defends his claims by quoting Psalm 82:6, which states, I said ye are gods, and you are all sons of the Most High, and uses it to argue that if God called human rulers gods, then it's not blasphemous to call him the Son of God. It's like there's a few things that are going on. All right, let me go ahead and pull these up. I think I know what you're doing there. That it's not, he's like not the unique Son of God kind of thing, which obviously is rejected in Islam. I'll be honest, I haven't looked at this since I had that discussion with the Mormon. So let me go ahead and pull this up here. I don't know what translation would be best. Let me just pull up chapter 10. We're at 34. Okay. Then came the festival of dedication at Jerusalem. I am looking at John chapter 10, verse 22. Let me think about this now. It was winter, and Jesus was in the temple courts walking in Solomon's colonnade. The Jews who were there gathered around him, saying, How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. Jesus answered, I did tell you, but you do not believe. The works I do in my Father's name testify about me. But you do not believe because you are not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. Again, his Jewish opponents picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus said to them, I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? We are not stoning you for any good work, they replied, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God. Jesus answered them, Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods? If he called them gods, to whom the word of God came, and scripture cannot be set aside, what about the one whom the Father sent apart as his very own and sent into the world? It's kind of making some sort of how much more so, right? Why then do you accuse me of blasphemy because I said I am God's son? Do not believe me unless I do the works of my Father. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me and I in the Father. Again, they tried to seize him, but he escaped their grasp. So, let me pull up Psalm 82:6. He seems to be making a how much more so argument. This is fascinating. That's KJV. Okay, let's look at Psalm 82. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. And quotations here, anyways, in this translation. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. The gods know nothing. They understand nothing. They walk about in darkness, and all the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High. But you will die like mere mortals. You will fall like every other ruler. Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your inheritance. Almost seems like a kind of typology for the angels, isn't it? Or it's linked to every other ruler, right? This language of that one who has authority over something can be rightly referred to as a god. I suppose the crude example was my relationship to my dog. As far as that dog is concerned, I am God, right? That we have a kind of authority over them. Interesting. Okay, so back to John. Let me grasp what it's saying. So they're saying that Jesus is blaspheming because you, a mere man, claim to be God. Jesus answered them, "It is not written in your law. Is it not written in your law? You said you are gods." Now, if he called them gods, that is authorities or rulers or whatnot, to whom the word of God came, if it's referring to those who, maybe like Moses, the prophets and whatnot, came to them, and scripture cannot be set aside. What about the one? See, so now he's saying, okay, you're going to take issue with this language of God because they had a certain authority. Kind of reminds me of the centurion who said, right, he gave that analogy about, I have people under me, under my authority, and I say to him, go, and this one goes. I say to that one, go, and that one goes. And Jesus said, he made some comment about, I have not seen such faith in Israel. You know, that Jesus has this authority. A question of authority. Let me think here now. What about the one whom the Father set apart as his very own and sent to the world? Now he's making some sort of claim, a unique claim about himself, not only about like a kind of pre-existence, the one whom the Father set aside as his very own and sent into the world. It's talking about some sort of pre-existence of this one with authority. Why then do you accuse me of blasphemy? Because I said I am the Son of God. Do not believe me unless I do the Father's works. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me and I in the Father. Again, see, they didn't like this language. They didn't like this language of the Father is in me and I in the Father. Very theologically developed in speaking about the relationship of this unique Son that had a pre-existence, the relationship between the Son and the Father. It's not the first time he made comments of this nature when he said that I and the Father are one. You know, this language is very unique and strong. But if I remember correctly, this is definitely not to be interpreted in the Mormon sense at all. Yeah, something like that. Okay, I'm behind. Okay, it's from John 30. Yes, that's right, Super. Yeah. Oh, I guess I could have quoted a different verse. I was really just trying to prove that he calls himself the Son of God. Yep. Oh, okay. I was actually wondering if there was more to it, but I guess not. That's fine. Bowser's Lair and the Salt Lake Temple share vibes. Come on, Mom. You know, one day we'll actually invite a Mormon to come in here and have a dialogue, okay? So we have to be throwing around jokes. Alright. It sounds weird, but part of what made me realize Christianity was the one is it's the only major religion founded where the founder doesn't have some weird sexual history. Okay, I'm trying. Okay, so Joseph Smith, right, had multiple wives. I think it's claimed, right? It's claimed that Muhammad had multiple wives, but again, like even from the Old Testament, there was a lot of poly. You know, like it's polygamy. Sorry, I was thinking of another term and stuff. Ah, that was another thing, Supa. I was thinking about is I noticed that there are some claims of very young, and I don't remember. I think. Oh, I was trying to remember the debate I was listening to. It was a debate between a Muslim, and I think it was a Catholic, and they were talking about Aisha. Is that her name? Like one of the. Anyways, I'm not saying it's true. It's an issue that comes up a lot in debates. Okay, I remember. See, my memory is so bad. Okay, but I can't remember my kid's birthday, but I can remember Aisha from like years ago. Gosh, my brain is weird, people. My brain is indeed weird. Okay. Okay, so Mork, let me think about this for a second. Let me play devil's advocate for a moment. So, we follow the God of Abraham, right? isn't like one of the major stories about Abraham is how he ended up having sex with Hagar? Having like Ishmael and whatnot. It depends on what you mean. I forgot your own birthday. That's good stuff. Okay, so if you think about it, even like within the so-called lineage of Jesus, we have Bathsheba, right? So David committed adultery with Bathsheba and had Solomon. I mean, people are very, but you're talking about founded, right? By a founder. Okay, I'm just saying that I think that given the fact that the claim of Christianity, which I believe, but the claim of Christianity is that Mary didn't have an earthly father, right? There's no sex involved, and that Jesus was celibate, right? There's no evidence in the New Testament, for example, that he was married or anything. Like some people claiming that that he married Mary Magdalene and all this other stuff, right? I think that was another thing that showed up in the Da Vinci Code. See, that's another question I'll have to kind of like bank in my mind is like, is Muhammad special in terms of lineage, or is he just some random guy who the Archangel Gabriel, ostensibly revealed things about God to him? You can keep all that. I guess you could say it here. I mean, you did to do what you want. But yes, I think going back to the answer. Who asked that question? Oh, decent. Okay, you were asking. You were asking whether or not Jesus ever claimed to be the Son of God. Yeah, he was both Son of God and Son of Man. And I think sometimes when people think of Son of Man, they're thinking, oh, he was just born a human being or something. And I think biblically it has a much greater meaning to it because of a passage in Daniel. One like the Son of Man coming in the clouds. Oh, the question. Oh, it just goes back to the question. I think you answered the question just now. I think you answered it. That you're saying that Muhammad is born from the lineage of Ishmael, right? That's the position. I think that's okay. Okay, okay. Now, is that lineage like obviously in like the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke? There's these genealogies, right? That kind of set forth a kind of lineage concerning Mary and or a legal route through Joseph. I'm not getting that debate concerning how to reconcile the two. But is there in Islam a kind of an established, I don't know if it's like was put into the Quran by Muhammad, a lineage of some sort concerning himself? or is it kind of just one of those big T tradition kind of things that he's said to have been from the lineage? There aren't any like ancient documents going back to the 600s that prove a bloodline or something. But yeah, I guess I don't know what the like. Did he claim that himself, or is that something that his followers after his death claimed about him? So it's not the Quran. I have to check. Okay, that's fine. You can just save that for our discussion. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Let's see, what time is it? It's 9:30. Technically, I have an hour before I absolutely have to get off. Well, we don't have to talk about Islam in it all night long. Anybody want to have a new topic for now? Any last questions to kind of finish us up, or? Hey, look, the corgi. The Doge likes my fingers. When you die, do you go to heaven right away, or is it suspended until judgment? Okay, you're kind of referencing the idea of soul sleep here. I had a friend, I was talking to him, and his belief was when you die, all right, from your perspective, you're instantly being resurrected, right? Because a lack of consciousness over time. So you die, and there's a lack of consciousness over time. So when you die, you're instantly being resurrected. There's like nothing going on here, kind of thing. Now, I don't know if he says there was a soul or there's a soul sleep or what have you, but that's not the Catholic view. Yes. Tampon commercial. Hey, listen here. I gotta pay my bills. You're gonna watch those tampon commercials because I need food. This needs food. I was actually talking to a guy and he was like, "You shouldn't have a dog." I'm like, "Why?" "Of course I want a dog. Why would I want to have a dog?" I hope it was the one with wings, or like, well, whatever. Hey, listen. Alright, so, but back to my point. Alright, so the Catholic perspective, alright, so I'm going to get really technical. I'm going to just have fun with it, okay? So in Catholic theology, the soul is the form of the body. Okay, so there's a substantial unity. That is that a man is both material and immaterial, both matter and form. Okay, but it constitutes a single substance, a single nature. So then what happens then when the body dies? Well, in Catholic theology, unlike other forms, the form of the body, which is the soul, persists. It continues to exist. Okay, there's a permanence to its existence, even after the body dies. So there's the destructionist and the survivalist perspectives. the destructionist perspective is that our nature was basically destroyed. And so whatever this soul is, it's not us because we were this one substance, and now it's not that. Alright. There's some truth to the destructionist perspective, but I'm going to propose the Thomistic idea of moderate survivalism. And that is that even with Aristotle, the thing that makes the thing what it is its form. All right, so an argument of identity has to do with the form. It's kind of like the ship of Theseus, right? You know, you can move planks. The material composition is not really as important as the continuity of its identity and its form, which is retained through the exchanging of planks. We're not going to get into the whole, well, why is it not the ship of Theseus in the shipyard when all the old parts are reassembled? Other than the fact that it lacks formal continuity, but we can talk about that another time. But the soul is said to persist. So the moderate survivalist perspective is that the identity is in the form. And this is something that survives the experience of death, right? And we say that the powers of the soul are what? Will, intellect. These things persist. So even though we're not quite what we were, we can't really say then, you know, that we don't exist, or there isn't some sort of identification with this thing that's in relation to the thing that we were. A good argumentation for this would be the fact of the idea that of cellular replacement. Kind of like the ship of Theseus, all the cells in your body, right, that are here now won't be here 10 years from now. Except for some certain neurons and so on and so forth. There are some exceptions to it. But what comprises the material of what you are is not what you were 20 years ago. This is basically the ship of Theseus. Am I the same person? Yes, because there's that substantial unity. Because the form continues to persist through material change. Right? So, then to answer your question, which was what? No, we're not suspended until judgment. God will take care of your soul. God will take care of you. In Catholic theology, there's a lot of souls who have entered into heaven, and they can even pray for you in Catholic theology. Just as people here on earth could pray for you who are part of the body of Christ, they too are part of the Church Triumphant. They were also part of the body of Christ, and we can ask anybody in the body of Christ to pray for us. It doesn't have to be specific. We could just basically say at the end of our prayers, may all the angels and saints pray with and for us, right? It doesn't have to be anything crazy or weird, or, you know, we're not engaging in necromancy here. We're just basically invoking, you know, hey, anybody who can pray for me, pray for me. I appeal to all those who are in the body of Christ. All right, let's see. We're going to have one. Okay, hang on. I'm back with demonstrating the absorbency. I think about that with the earth. Does this one get destroyed, or do we return to this earth in its perfect Eden form? Well, Revelation does talk about a new heaven and a new earth. Obviously, things aren't so great here right now. You know, we are awaiting a second coming. Christ said there would be a second coming in Catholic theology. And he will make all things new. Right? He will make all things new. There is the idea of the conflagration right? In Greek philosophy, everything would be destroyed with fire, so on and so forth. I'm fine with this idea with everything's going to be purged or purified or made new. I think in some respect they got something right. What precisely body will you have? I'm of the opinion, no, I said opinion, that will probably look like what we are in our prime. You know, heck, maybe we'll even have certain characteristics about us that are unique. After all, Jesus did raise from the dead with, the nail marks in a hole in his side. Well, in this case, his identity of the sacrifice that goes into the heavenly temple. All right, let's see. What does praying do? What does praying do? This is a huge question in the world of Christian theology, because if God is sovereign, if he is in control of absolutely everything, and his will doesn't change, it's not contingent, it's not malleable, right? He's actus purus, he's pure actuality. So there isn't anything that we could do that changes what his will is, but that doesn't mean that his will isn't already decided in accordance with certain things that he knew we would do. As such, prayer, first and foremost, like in the Old English, pray tell or ask, seems to be much more suitable when we're talking to asking for intercession of the saints or people who will pray for us and stuff of that nature. Prayer can be broken down into many different aspects as it's reflected in the Lord's Prayer. Prayer can involve praise. It can involve adoration, right? We recognize God as God. We give him his due. So there's adoration. There's supplication. Hey, Eel, thanks for the gift sub to Mork. Mork, enjoy those ad-free viewings. No more tampons for you. So there's adoration. Okay, there's supplication. We're asking God to provide for us, which he will do. Which brings us to this whole idea of conforming ourselves or resigning ourselves to divine sovereignty, his providence. Okay, if you don't know what providence means, it has the word provide in it, right? God provides us with all things. All right, so it's an acknowledgement of what God is. So there's Thanksgiving. We're very thankful. We say, hey, God, thank you for something. Well, that sounds like a just thing to do. If our parents give us a gift, hey, thank you. God created me. I exist. I didn't have to exist. I exist. I can say, hey, thank you, God. Give to him his due in that sense. Praise is saying, hey, I mean, I've had people tell me that I'm an awesome guy, right? Now, I wouldn't demand it, but if I'm awesome, hey, let's just acknowledge that I'm awesome, right? I'm cool. Seeing things as they are. Prayer, even though it involves all of these things, forgiveness, supplication, adoration, supplication, basically you can take every line of the Our Father and break it down and understand it as a unique component of what prayer is. But over all of that is the acknowledgement of God. If I lived in a house with somebody, never acknowledged them as a human being, how do you think they'd feel? Well, how much more so do you think God feels, who is the creator of all people, and we never give any kind of acknowledgement to it whatsoever? We think it weird, like God's needy, or that God's desperate, like he has to get something from us, or he's demanding something from us. But I mean, don't you think it would be weird to like work with one of your coworkers who never looked you in the eye? You know, if you felt a sense of, hey, maybe you should just acknowledge that I work with you, that I'm actually here and not bump through me or anything like that. You know, I think it would be weird for us to characterize that I'm demanding from people something that's really weird or inappropriate. So like, if so if we don't acknowledge God, it's like that. You know, he too is in this room. You know, he sustains the existence of all things. Nothing has to exist necessarily. Nothing has to exist. There's no philosophical argumentation for why any of this exists. There just isn't. People who try to make some sort of claim that the whole set of contingent things has an attribute that none of the members do. Although such arguments could be made, but it doesn't apply here. Because even that needs an explanation. Gotta keep going, gotta keep digging till you get to an explanation that explains itself. And that's where you stop. That's the highest point that the intellect can go. So the practical impact of prayer is it does put us in right relation to God, nature, and reality and everything. It really does. Because the adoration, the praise, the recognition, all of those things are just very, very basic that we would give to any human being. We would just, quite frankly, give to him in a much greater degree, because we receive much more from him than we receive from anybody else. So, in a sense, prayer does have a... I am on Discord, yeah. Would you like to be invited to my Discord channel, or do you just want to connect as friends on Discord? Yeah, we can be friends on Discord. If you want to send me a whisper of your Discord ID, then I can get you invited to my Discord ID. Because you have to understand that God doesn't need something from us. It's not as a matter of like divine need, like we have a need. Right? Once again, that's kind of like a anthropomorphic projection upon God. He doesn't have like a need per se. Well, as human beings, we're contingent and we're reliant on everything. The oxygen in this air, the food around us, where we consume just to continue to exist. We have needs. all kinds of needs. Some are more wants. Because like if you don't die if you don't have it, is it really a need? Chocolate ice cream. Yeah, it reminds me of that Invader Zim cartoon in the episode where the guy's driving around in ice cream truck and it's announcing, "You need ice cream. You love ice cream. Your existence is meaningless without ice cream." Right? Without ice cream, we would be just locked in this perpetual existential like crisis. We need chocolate. Alright, I got the alright. So chocolate ice cream. Gotta love it. Now, I don't eat the chocolate peanut butter ice cream. I like Rocky Road, double fudge brownie, not that triple stuff. Can't be triple, that's just weird. Who would do that? I used to eat a lot of chip mint growing up. I used to also have remember the stuff my mom got? It was kind of like, it tastes like a creamsicle or something. It was like Midsummer Night's Dream. I liked cherry cordial. I don't know why, I guess I'm weird. Who wants fruit in their ice cream? But cherry cordial, I always thought that was really tasty. That was one of my favorites growing up. Cookies and cream? Who doesn't like cookies and cream? I would say I probably wouldn't like pistachio ice cream. Like, did you guys remember on that movie City Slickers? And this guy who had this way of just being able to associate any ice cream with any meal, like steak and potatoes and this and that. He could tell you exactly what flavor of ice cream that you should have. I thought it was funny. But yeah, pistachio ice cream, probably not. Yeah, depending on what you had for dinner. Shadow is giving us side eye. Yeah, here. Let me zoom in. Hey, how's it going? Oh, you don't like Daddy being on the computer? You want Daddy to get off and rub your belly? Lucky Charms ice cream. It was gross. Lucky Charms. Yeah, that dog's on to me. So you heard that tattoos defended as the time it was about being different from other religions and is outdated. Mark, we love you. It's probably the hardest I've laughed in months. It's so good for my brain. Okay, we're back. They'll totally understand. Okay. Alright, so the defense of tattoos. Alright, so what you're saying is that what stops this type of logic from being applied? I don't know. I think that the Prophet of Baal probably still doesn't have tattoos anymore, only because the soft tissue has been decayed. I think there's any present prophets of Baal. Alright, well, the argument that there should be female pastors simply because there was a cultural thing, then, well, like, all time immemorial, that just because, like, well, in America, at one time women couldn't vote, now they can vote. Hey, let's just change the teachings of the Catholic Church and its theology surrounding the priesthood. Like, how does that follow? It's like the greatest of all non sequiturs. You just listen to a bishop talking about this actually on the radio, and he said tattoos are neither bad nor good, but they do stem from paganism, so why do it? I don't remember who it was. I think it was like Mitch Pacwa or somebody who had made this comment to the effect that, you know, we're already made in the image and likeness of God. We're like this Harley, you know? Like, why would you spray paint it? You know, or we're this great temple of the Holy Spirit. Why would you put graffiti all over it? You know, just stuff like that. Now, I'm not, of all the things, honestly, of all the things that could. Now, I think if a person is like completely tattooed, that's just insane. I think that's kind of ridiculous. You couldn't work at a bank with like visible tattoos at some point, you know. It's just, there was just something about it that was just not professional, that wasn't presentable kind of thing, you know. If you have a little butterfly on your ankle or something, like, you're not going to hell, you know. I mean, no, I don't think I'll ever get a tattoo. But if I did, I'd probably get like some sort of like cross on the arm or something, you know. But I don't really feel so inclined to do that. I mean, John Cooper of Skillet, you know, gotta have them tattoos. You know, they probably all have tattoos. But I wouldn't say that somebody, like, just think about it. Of all the things to take issue with. Now, I would be more concerned if, like, getting one tattoo, 1 in 100 chance of causing skin cancer, you know, then it's like, well, how can you even do that? You know, the risk is too high. Even if you got, like, cancer 1 out of, like, 100,000 or something, you know, I don't think you can make that argument. Because, you know, even tobacco within, you know, I mean, I consume alcohol, I consume nicotine. You know, I don't think it's excessive. I'm not smoking 3 packs a day. I'm not drinking a 6-pack every day. You know, I'm having a couple while just having some fun, or, you know, I might take a drag here or there, or have some dip or something. I just, not very much. You know, moderation is very important for me. Now, granted, I don't, like, focus on, I don't do other things, you know, because it impairs me too much. That's why I don't get drunk. That's why you know, I might have 2 or 3 beers or something, but I'm not going to have anything more than that, because that's, I want to be able to be in full control of my rational faculties. I don't want to diminish that in any serious way at all. Not at all. But just because paganism did something, you know, it's like, well, pagans went out into the woods and cut a tree and brought it into their house and adorned it. Hey, that's Christmas. That's like one of the arguments that Jehovah's Witness gave me for why we shouldn't celebrate Christmas, because of that verse in the Old Testament where it talks about how they went out in the woods and found a tree and they brought it in and they adorned it. Like, I'm not worshiping my freaking tree. You know, it's like paganism. Kind of reminds me of the meat sacrificed to idols argument that Paul gives, right? He says, you can eat meat sacrificed to idol because what is an idol, right? We thank God for food and we move on. But if somebody's conscience is weak, if it's weak, then maybe for the sake of not scandalizing them, we'll not eat the meat. But they need to get over themselves and eat some meat too. Because what is an idol in this world? Right? Paul makes that argument. So who cares if paganism did something? You know? A pagan at one time celebrated their birthday. You know? Like Hitler once drank water. You know, it's like, come on, people. Stop. Anecdote. But my friend who has gone off the rails leftist started with basic tattoos and now does blasphemous tattoos. Well, that's what he did. I suppose, you know, tattoos are going to kind of reflect the person. But I wouldn't say that a tattoo in and of itself caused the trajectory. I would say that their leanings caused the wrong trajectory. Like if I got a tattoo right now of like a crucifix here and Mary over here, you're not gonna expect like 5 years down the road I'm gonna have like naked women all over my body and whatnot. It's like, come on. And that's kind of like a slippery slope fallacy kind of thing, you know, or at least in this case, you're looking at causation, and there's the mere fact of getting a tattoo is causing people to just go off the rails. Like it's like an opening for a demon that you get a tattoo of Christ on your arm is an opening for a demon. And like within 5 years, because of the crucifix on your arm, over here you're going to have a totally naked woman and like some weird orgy or something going on over here. You know, it's like, that's probably not going to be the case. You know, if I'm going to do an ab absurdum kind of press there. Well, that line was specifically about how Polynesians have it as part of their culture, but the bishop said, yeah, and it's a pagan culture. Yeah. That's funny. I'm not saying that you should go out and get a tattoo. I'm just saying. I'm just saying he went all out and has arm cover. Oh yeah, like the sleeve, right? It's basically like a whole arm sleeve kind of thing going on. You see these people are just completely covered in tattoos, and it's like there's got to be something demonic in one of their tattoos. Just you wait. I suppose it's true. I've seen. I suppose if we were to do some sort of survey of people who have every inch of their body covered in tattoos, what percentage has some sort of blasphemous kind of image on their body? Now I can only make assumptions at this point, but I'm going to guess that maybe they do. Even if they have a snake coming out of a skull or something like that, they have something that's morbid or, you know, like a serpent. You know, it has the imagery of a serpent is too. So unless it's like Mary standing on top and crushing the head of a serpent, you know, the image of a serpent has really historically and traditionally, like the imagery, from the first book of the Bible and the last book of the Bible, the serpent from the beginning. It would be very interesting to know, honestly. Yeah. Those are really bad, huh? It is interesting, though. Particularly if you were to ask this, you would raise the same sort of question of somebody who has tattoos absolutely over their entire body, but yet it's completely absent of any kind of demonic image, but is like nothing but Jesus on a crucifix and a dove and Mary, and this, like, the whole body is nothing but like a stained glass window that is preaching the gospel to you, which is why they walk around in nudist colonies and don't have to say a word. I'm going to guess that the number of people who fit that criteria is very small. Or do an experiment. Walk into a tattoo parlor. Look at all the tattoo images that they could do. It might just be a variety or hodgepodge of stuff, but if you could walk, here's the thing, if you could walk into a that's a large question like that. Oh yeah. If you could walk into a tattoo parlor and they're only willing to do like Christian art, right? They're never willing to do any kind of demonic like image, like a little devil or something like that. Of all the tattoo parlors in all the world, how many do you think avoid? They're not willing to do any sort of demonic image of any sort. Now, once again, I don't think this makes a tattoo intrinsically bad. I mean, I could have a scar on my... I don't know, like... Okay, so there's the health issue, right? I mean, come on, you're kind of like injuring the skin, right? You're kind of injuring the skin. So it's sort of like a form of self-harm that you're doing that doesn't really have any kind of... It's not like we're cutting open your chest to do heart surgery here. You know what I mean? Where there's the argument of proportionality. You'll die if you don't, like, kind of thing. Mutilation of the flesh is something I generally stay away from. Seems to be a little more popular in our own culture. Through hormones and surgeries and so on and so forth. We all know what I'm talking about. But mutilation of the flesh, alteration, those sorts of things, can become socially popular. And I know I don't want to do something just because a culture does it. I don't want to do something just because there's some sort of like argumentation for it. Personally, I'm not going to get any tattoos because I'm a firm believer in not altering the body or causing self-harm or anything of that nature. Besides, whatever argument that one could have for a tattoo, like preaches the gospel, or they see a cross. Be like, well, I got my intellect, so I'm fine. I don't have to be a stained glass window. I can recite to you. All right, folks. Guess what time it is? We've been on for 3 hours. I appreciate that each and every one of you. I was having a rough day. I've had a good laugh. I've had some good conversations, and this was exactly what I needed today. So, like I said, tomorrow we are interviewing Will concerning his continual Catholic studies after becoming Catholic a couple of years ago. And the day after that, we're going to be doing an interview of Pedro Gabriel, who's author of many books, many in defense of Pope Francis against the traditionalists. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation. We're definitely going to be focusing on the content of his works and so on and so forth. Will's probably going to be talking about all the things that he had learned since we talked last time. So be sure to turn in tomorrow. Tomorrow it looks like that if you want to catch it live and have any questions for Will, tomorrow I will be 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I will be talking to Will on Wednesday, March 19th, and then on Thursday, March 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we'll be talking to Pedro. So we get 2 really good interviews coming up. So hopefully you could be there. Hopefully you have some questions for them. Otherwise, enjoy the discussions